Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Feature, the show where we stop obsessing over buttons and menus and start talking about the real world value behind Microsoft 365. So I'm your host, Dr. Patrick Jones, and today we're doing a special spotlight episode that I'm really excited about. We spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about strategy, best practices, and what Microsoft 365 can do. But today we're going to zoom in on what it looks like when someone actually does it inside a real organization. So my guest is Viktoriya, who leads a lot of the SharePoint and modern workplace efforts for her company. She has that rare mix of big picture vision and practical, here's how we'll actually build this experience. So we've worked together a lot. We're going to talk about how she has used SharePoint and workflows, but not just to move files to the cloud. She really wants to change how people work day to day. We'll dig into automation, return on investment, and how she helps people move from this is just another tool to I can't imagine working without this, which is the whole point. So whether you're an IT pro, business leader, or the unofficial Microsoft 365 person at your company, I think you'll get a lot out of the practical ideas that we're going to dig into this conversation. So let's jump right in. Viktoriya, thank you for joining us in this Beyond the Feature Spotlight.
Thank you for having me, Patrick.
So for folks that don't know you yet, can you introduce yourself and your role?
Absolutely. Again, thank you for having me on the show. It's such an honor. I'm really thrilled to be here. What I get to do, put simply, is build digital workspaces where people can actually get things done. So on any given day, I'm in the cloud ecosystem, and I serve as a mix of M365 admin / architect / designer / SharePoint Sherpa. And what I get to do is help teams navigate messy, often inherited information and different ways of working, and turn all of that into secure, organized spaces that just make sense. So I bounce a lot between IT speak and quote unquote business speak constantly. So I'm kind of like the translator in the room, making sure that the tech works for the business and not the other way around. And my work stretches from early discovery conversations to hands-on building the site, and all the way through things like delivery and handoff and training. And I like to say it's problem solving every day because it really is. It's listening to uncover the client's needs and understanding how people actually communicate and share knowledge.
That's awesome. So how did you first get into SharePoint and Microsoft 365? Was it intentional or did you fall into it like so many of us?
Oh my gosh. Yes, I definitely fell into it. As they say, the M365 life chose me, But like in all seriousness, I was thinking about that the other day, actually. In every early job I've ever had, there was always some piece of the role that tied back to SharePoint. It was never officially in my role, but I guess people instinctively handed me the reins because they're like, oh, she'll figure it out. I'd make sense of it, right? And I really leaned into it when I was asked to build an intranet from the ground up. And I took it as a sign that I should really, I should probably invest in learning the platform and what it can do. And, the more I learned, the more it clicked. And I kind of found myself really enjoying the process, like all the web parts, building the back end of it. It was really interesting. And it was kind of like a slow burn kind of love for me. It was like realizing that the thing that had been in front of me the whole time, kind of like in the corner of my career all along, was actually what I enjoyed the most. So once I really leaned into that and invested into learning SharePoint, taking certifications, the path kind of unfolded from there.
And that's actually where you and I caught up. We did a project together. That's how we started.
Absolutely. I couldn't have done it without you. And I
Yeah,
remember
it
you
was so
saying,
much
you're
fun.
like, Viktoriya, you will know this better than me one day. Like, you will take the reins. And that's what I love about working with you. It's never about keeping us dependent on like a consultant or one person or one process. It's you really allowed for me to learn it and learn it alongside me. And I still go to you, you know, but I love working with you because you never make it about I need to reach this quota or I got to make them dependent on me. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big differentiator with working with someone like you.
Yep. It was fun. I mean, I love it because I learn as much from you guys as you guys do from me, and you can just take it and run.
Yes. Yep.
Super. So, what was the moment when you realized, wait, SharePoint isn't just a place where you dump your files, it's a place where you can actually change the way people work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the moment I realized was when I discovered that you can do co-authoring in SharePoint, similar to co-editing a Google Doc. And that was significant for me because I had come from an environment from a previous job where you literally had to check documents in and out of a document management system. It was like taking a library book home, and if someone forgot to check it back in, everyone else was stuck. So the first time I saw that multiple people could edit the same document in SharePoint Online at the same time, look at the same information in real time, the same version, my brain just lit up. So I would say that was the moment. And that really opened my eyes to the real beauty of the ecosystem, the interconnectivity. Because, a file in SharePoint isn't, it's your file on your own drive. It's a shared living document, as I like to call it, that the entire team can access. So what I love is that it's not tethered to one person's computer or a very specific file. There's this openness to it that's so attractive to me because it shifts things from ownership to collaboration. SharePoint
Yep.
does that.
Yeah, I love how you said it's like a living document. That's really how it grows with you.
Correct. Yeah. And one of my favorite examples of this in real life was a project where we had a business that had thousands of scanned documents, like literal decades of history just sitting in boxes and collecting dust. And they decided that they wanted to make that information, actually usable for their team. And they couldn't have the scans sit with the vendor because they made them, electronic scans. So we got our brains together and we built a site, uploaded everything, all of those scans, and the SharePoint actually indexed the file names. And what I mean by that is it read what's inside the scans, not just the title. So suddenly these dusty, forgotten documents were searchable by keyword. So if someone needed to reference something from 1989, hello, Taylor Swift, boom, 2 seconds. You have that. And I think that was a big moment for me because, when you see information move from being locked away in a literal box or, in someone's personal folder on their computer to being accessible, livable, living, searchable, just usable by an entire team, that's when you realize it's not just storage. SharePoint is not just a file dump, and it's not just a feature, it's a knowledge engine.
Yeah. And honestly, you guys are doing it so right because you're getting yourself even ready for the next level with Copilot. That indexing dials right into it.
Right. Absolutely.
Awesome. So before you started modernizing all of that, what were some of the pain points you actually saw out there in your organization, especially around communication, document management, and approvals? I mean, you kind of mentioned it with the checking in, checking out.
Hmm.
Those are pain points that are huge. What other kind of things did you see, not just for you, but for the people that came to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really big one. When it comes to communication, document management, approvals, with the items you mentioned, the biggest challenge that I saw was that teams treat them kind of like three separate problems, but in reality, they're really connected. So, like, if your documents are organized, if then your communication becomes really fragmented. You don't know what the correct version is, and if your communication is fragmented, your approvals end up happening in 10 different places, right? Email chats, side conversations, outdated versions of files, all like 20 different technologies, you name it. Um, you know, I think most of us have had a cumbersome experience with SharePoint at some point. And I think, I can come up with dozens of reasons, but sometimes the site just looks too busy. I've heard people say that, or other times site permissions were set like 100 years ago and the person who had the keys left. So you just see access
Exactly.
denied.
Well, and that old school SharePoint environment was just like you said, it's rigid and it's very static. So once you
Correct.
hit that SharePoint online, it opens it up to just be dynamic. And that's the modern work that you're fantastically promoting.
Thank you. Yes. And to add to that, proper training. So that's another
Yes.
piece because I mean, when you don't have clear governance or like site hygiene, especially if you're not used to the SharePoint online and if you're used to just the classic version, there's a gap there. You got to address that. So it's it's kind of a mix of those things that I just mentioned. Sometimes the look of it, there wasn't a lot of um, thought put into it, and honestly, like those issues happen because the foundation wasn't set right. And I call it implementation without organization. um,
Love it.
yeah, it's a lot of the pain points I see come from teams that are doing straight like lift and shift from file shares into SharePoint without actually looking at the data.
Yeah.
So I've seen storage where like nearly half the files were duplicates or like buried in another folder or are just so out of date. They're just beyond useless, but nobody will pull the trigger and actually delete them. And so, like, when you carry all that clutter into a new workspace, so let's say you want to transition to SharePoint Online, right? It just becomes a newer, shinier version of the same problem.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. So how do you balance? You're talking about giving all these people these new features, right? Making their life world changing, and training is a huge part of it. But how do you help them with those features, not overwhelming them? Like, what does simple but modern look like?
So, one of my favorite questions I like to ask stakeholders when we begin a conversation about let's get started on a SharePoint, let's get started on a new digital workspace for you. What kind of features do you want? One of the best questions I ask when we begin that conversation is if you were your intended audience, and I put quotes on that because you have to figure that out, and you open this homepage for the very first time, what would you want to see? And you'd be amazed how often that question makes those stakeholders, those people stop in their tracks and say, well, wait a second, I never actually thought about that. Because now we have to get clear on A, who are we really building this for? Like, who is our
Yeah,
intended audience?
audience. Yep.
And B, what do we want to make absolutely sure they can find or do right away? So if they name four truly important things, then those four things become the focus because that's what they will be looking for.
Yeah,
And
and it's like their home base, right?
absolutely, as it should be, right? The homepage should
Yep.
be the hub in a way of of everything else that flows downstream. And I think it's always worth spending more time getting very clear on what the real needs are than jumping in and offering solutions. Because
Exactly.
powerful features, right, they're all around us. They are available and they're popping up every minute. And it is so overwhelming, even for the most technical person out there. Full disclosure, I try to facilitate expectations in phases. So that's what's been working for me. For example, like those 4 important things my client mentioned at the beginning, that's phase 1. Everything else is phase 2 or later.
Definitely. Yeah, because you got to work on that workflow right away because that helps them focus what they need. You can give them features left and right, and it's all the shiny little toys. But if they don't have a focus on how it's going to improve their workplace and their flow, it becomes overwhelming.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, a huge part of my job happens before anything gets built. I help people step back and think through what they actually need, even when they're not totally sure themselves. And I know most teams know something isn't working, or maybe they saw something elsewhere, like a feature that they saw at their previous job or online, but they can't always pinpoint the why. So I help them untangle that and figure out what to keep, what to let go of, and what's going to support their work going forward. So it really is an ongoing conversation.
And and we know there's an investment that's tied with that resource, right? We know Microsoft doesn't do it out of the generosity of their heart. So there's like a return on that investment that's giving these employees and you and your whole teams these new tools. So here's a tricky one on that return, right? If your CFO asked, why are we investing in this? What's your short, business focused answer?
I would say because our people's time is the most expensive thing we own,
Ooh, I like that.
right? Like time is money. M365 gives them a structured, secure place to work, and features like, Copilot help them work smarter inside of it. So to the CFO listening, instead of paying people to search for files and keep reinventing that wheel, we're giving them tools that automate those repetitive things and surface the information they need instantly. SharePoint provides the structure, Teams provides the connection, and Copilot adds the intelligence feature.
Love it. So here we go. So, are there any features in Microsoft 365? You've already mentioned Teams and Copilot along with SharePoint, but what is it that you're excited to bring in next? Right? Copilot, Viva, Power Platform, something else like Loop or Planner? What do you got?
I'm always excited when the new features roll out. Probably more excited than a normal person should be. Um, that's part of the job. One of the things I'm loving right now is the new FAQ functionality that's in preview
Ooh, yeah.
in SharePoint. And it works with, Copilot. You can have a Copilot Studio license to build agents, but I'm going to be very classic and just um, talk about the FAQ functionality. It sounds so simple, but it's really a big deal for me because up until now, every company has had to hack, their own FAQ solution. They have
Yeah.
to create their own accordion web parts, make pages, add in the manual list, and the new FAQ component finally gives the users on the site a clean built-in way to present very common questions and answers. And I love the user-friendly format. It's searchable. It's easy to update. I just think it fits perfectly into the modern SharePoint experience. And I think it's a great way to get ahead of agents. So I would start with the FAQ functionality first before delving into the agent sphere. Like that would
Yeah,
be a really good gateway drug.
it really is. I mean, it's taking it's like a graphic interface of what the agent could be, right?
Right.
So I love it. Yeah, and it's getting them ready for like what Copilot could be. Awesome. So for somebody listening, right, who's out there stuck in email and share drives, where would you tell those guys to start?
Start at home. your OneDrive home, of course. For con, I grew up watching a lot of HGTV, and I've always loved their tagline, "Start at home." That really stuck. So I'm going to give the same advice: start at home, and by home I mean OneDrive home. My advice is pick one thing that's a small adjustment and model that change, and process yourself consistently. So introduce one behavior change at a time and have folks get really comfortable using OneDrive first before they make the leap to SharePoint. Or, if that one thing is co-authoring a document instead of emailing drafts, that could be your one thing. But pick one very small, specific thing to do. What I've seen is that once people experience how much easier work becomes, even if it's just that one small shift, they start asking, wait, can we do this for this? Can we do this for Teams? And it, again, the conversation just evolves. And if it eventually becomes their idea and not because it's something you mandated, congratulations, they've embraced the change.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely build upon that momentum. I say, just don't overwhelm them with features. Get super granular and focus on just one feature. And to give you some example, if I'm leading a project, I will intentionally house all documents for that project in a OneDrive folder or a folder on an existing SharePoint site if we're there already. So even if the rest of the team keeps using email to communicate back and forth, I will continue hyperlinking those files in my conversations and referencing back to that same location. And if I do that consistently, eventually the team grows to expect all the work related to that project to live in that shared location. And then, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, and that's what we talked about for weeks here on this podcast is, hey, you're working where it exists. You're right where the work is, and you're modeling how it should be done.
Yes.
Right? And you're giving that authority to them by you doing it. It lets them see how to do it, and it is appropriate to do it. So they have that trust with you. I love it.
Yes. That's the goal.
So sorry. So what is your favorite hidden gem that you think all of these people should know about? Well, so when you're working with them and doing all this and showing it to them as you're doing it, what is one thing that you think they should know about?
Audience targeting. I think a lot of people may know about audience targeting, like that it exists, but very few use it strategically. With audience targeting, you can personalize their navigation, their web parts, their news, even highlighted content based on the role, the department, the location, group membership, you name it. You can really get it super specific. And what I love about it is it reduces noise and it helps users feel like the site is built for them, not for everyone. It's not just generalized information. And I think that level of personalization is very key in, future state, right? I think it's one of the easiest ways to make a large intranet feel smaller and smarter and probably more meaningful. So to answer your question, audience targeting.
Yeah, no, that's a great one because as much as SharePoint can do, I mean, that can dial it down for them. And so that doesn't get as overwhelming. They don't see all this other stuff that maybe not impact them that they can get lost in. You're giving them what they need.
Exactly.
Nice. All right. So, well, what was the moment when you realized that you can take that modern workplace and turn it into something that can really transition your organization? What's the one tipping point that you noticed?
I think when I realized that a modern workspace isn't so much a specific tech stack, it's more of an experience. What really comes to mind is the French phrase that Anthony Bourdain used to say when he was describing Michelin-starred kitchens, and that is mise en place. It means everything in its place. And that's exactly how I picture an ideal digital workspace. So when I learned more about the features and all of these different apps, it's like, wait a second, they're not just there randomly. Like, and it's not all about continuing to add on to the pile. It's not about the tech stack. It's about everything in its place, and getting it there. That's kind of how I think about a modern workspace, in real practical terms. And what that looks like for me is actually being a bit ruthless with what stays and what goes. And I'm a huge believer in maximizing what you already have, such what you're already paying for, instead of accumulating more. And I think a lot of that experience comes from educating users about features and apps they may not know exist that could be leveraged from existing tools. And that's just how I believe a modern workspace should make people feel. It should make them feel confident using the tools. And that only happens when the structure and guardrails are already in place. Like, for example, I think it's empowering for users to be able to create their own teams and channels. I think it's a good thing, but they also need extremely clear naming conventions with that freedom. So that way, like, you don't have 4 teams and 7 channels about the same exact conversation. So for me, in a soundbite moment, right, it's less is more, but focus on making the less high quality.
Nice. Less is more, but focus on making the less high quality. I love that.
Let's put that on a t-shirt.
No kidding. Well, this has been such a helpful conversation with us, Viktoriya. So thanks again for taking your time. Anything you want to leave us with before we head out?
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think the work that you're doing is so meaningful, and having conversations like this really open peel the layer back, and allow folks to really hear about what's going on with M365 and all the features. And I just love the work that you're doing. It's very important. It's definitely beyond the feature. And I'm very grateful for you inviting me on your show to talk about SharePoint being beyond just a feature.
That's it. It's the completely idea. So, I love the way that when you came on, that everything in its place. I'm going to have to remember that.
Mise en
because
place.
It's so true. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I can't speak the French part, but the rest of it is great. So I think that's something that a lot of the listeners here is going to be able to start doing right away in their organization. You've given them a lot of important steps that they can just start right away to get going. So for those of you listening, if this episode sparked some ideas about SharePoint workflows, modern workplace, maybe the projects at your company, I'd love to hear about it. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, or reach out through AuditSolve or Olympus Academy, and let me know what you're building. And I can put you in touch with Viktoriya if you'd like to learn more from her too. There's so much you can learn from her. And if you enjoy Beyond the Feature, it really helps if you follow the show and favorite the podcast, the app, and leave a quick rating or review. That's how people know we're here and what we're doing and how they can get that value out of 365. Again, thanks again for listening. And I'm Dr. Patrick Jones, and this has been Beyond the Feature. And I'll see you in the next episode.